Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good day to you all. And thank you so much for joining us to kick off our 2024 season. Today, we'll be discussing accelerating the used EV market. We have a great presentation for you. Fourth, we'll be joined by Recurrent. Um, Sierra Club and Cox Automotive to talk about accelerating the used EV market and programs and incentives for those. I am Simbiat Yusuf Mahler. I am the events manager at Fourth. Before we start today, we have a few announcements from the Fourth team. Attendees, please be sure to submit all of your questions through the attendee chat. We'll be getting through those questions during our Q&A portion of the day. So as the presentations are going, we'll be collecting those questions. We will also be sharing the webinar recording, slides, and resources in an email shortly after the webinar today. If you have any questions, if you missed anything, not to worry, we are recording the session. And in case you are new to Fourth, this is a new year, but it's not a new Fourth. If you're new to Fourth, we are a nonprofit organization that envisions a world where clean and equitable transportation systems move everything and everyone. Our mission is to electrify transportation by bringing people together to create solutions that reduce pollutions and barriers to access. Our work is done in five focus areas: access to electric cars, access to charging, access to emerging modes, events and partnerships, and policy advocacy. If you would like to learn more about Fourth, our work, and what we do, you can find that information at fourthmobility.org. I'll wait for the recap email. And the work we do at Fourth will not be possible without the support of our members and sponsors. We want to take this opportunity to thank them for their support over the years. If you have any questions regarding sponsorship for the webinar series or membership by Fourth, or how to get your name on the Fourth website, you can find that information on our website, or you can email our membership and partnership manager, Rachel Abacam. Email on the slide. New year, Fourth is growing. We are growing yet again. We are hiring a contracts and compliance manager. This position will manage, execute, review, and monitor all Fourth contracts and grant. If you're interested or know someone that is interested in this position, if this is ringing a bell or calling your name, we will send out more information in the chat, and we will also be sending information about this position in our webinar recap. We want you on the Fourth team. We are a great team. And then there is a big party hosted by Fourth, networking receptions, great panels, great conversation happening in September 24th to the 26th of 2024. If you're interested in demonstrating your organization's leadership at the conference, we call on you to sponsor the conference. Also, please make sure you are registered to attend. You do not want to miss this. This is the best roadmap to come. So you want to be there. You want to invite all your friends in the industry to also come to the conference. More information can be found at roadmapfort.org. We will also be linking to that in the chat. And we've mentioned this a couple of times, but new updates for you all. We are inviting everyone that is listening and tuning into this webinar to be involved in our public EV infrastructure program. We invite you all to sign up for this self-paced, user-friendly resource that provides videos, assets, and technical assistance to expand EV charging access in rural and underserved communities. Speaking of savings, because this is the year to save as well, we are offering all attendees of this webinar 50% discount on registration fees. You can scan the QR code right now, or go on the website, link in the chat and use the code EVFEB50 to access that 50% discount on registration. This is a great resource and you do not want to miss out on that. And exciting things are happening. Fourth, events. We are hosting two workshops, one in March 14th in DC and April 17th in Chicago, called Design and Fund Equitable Electric Transportation for Your Communities. And again, more savings because we want to thank our sponsor, Ashto. And because of Ashto, we are now offering free access to community-based organizations, nonprofit organizations, and local government agencies looking to attend these workshops. These workshops will include some resources, engaging panels to cover all scopes if you're looking to apply for funding opportunities to bring electric transportation into your community. And that is all for me. I will pass it along to our moderator, Scott Case, CEO at Recurrent, to start us off. You're probably tired of hearing from me now, and we want to hear about the great panel we have for you today. Hi, Scott.
Hi, thanks for having me. We're talking all about used EVs today, which is exciting because my company, Recurrent, is focused our sun, moon, and stars on used electric vehicles. For drivers, we help people understand and track their batteries and take care of them like they always used to with their combustion engine cars. And then for people buying and selling EVs, we essentially help people figure out what they're going to get in the battery and what that's going to mean for range and everything like that, what they should pay for the car. So that's why we're here, and thank you for having us. So just broadly starting about the used vehicle market in general. So the used vehicles is probably many of you know is the most common route to car ownership for most people. In fact, 62% of lower income households acquire cars used versus just 17% buy them new. However, used EVs is a very small nascent market for right now, although growing very quickly. So I think due to lack of available inventory and historically high cost, I think not a lot of people have considered that as an option right now. But ultimately, the used car market in general is over twice the size of the new car market. So in a lot of ways, the development of the used EV market is you might even say more important than the development of the new EV market. So let's just gauge everybody, kind of where everyone's at. We're going to do a little quick poll on your personal experience with. Essentially, can we launch the poll here? The question is basically, have you purchased an EV yourself? And if so, was it new? Was it used? Or haven't gotten there yet? My next car will be an EV. So I think we're going to just give people a couple of minutes. I'm not sure how the polling works. We are getting there. So we are. All right, cool. So what's interesting here, I think, is like this. Although most of the press, I think we can probably we get the gist of this. 2/3 of folks are going to purchase an EV next, but then other than that, equal versus for new and used. And I think it's really interesting because uh, the new EV market is what gets all the press. That's like what everyone writes about, and it's just only now that people are writing about used, and yet equal numbers of new and used purchases so far. So, a couple of quick data points that we have been tracking, and Stuart just posted the source for where I'm going to kind of cite some used EV market stats. So, sales volume in the used EV market in 2024. We do a whole bunch of market math on this. So we're expecting over 500,000 used battery electric and plug-in hybrids to be sold in the U.S. market in 2024. That's up 40% from last year and double what it was in 2022. What's driving those big chunks of growth is essentially the 3-4 year anniversary of the Model 3 and the Model Y kind of coming out new in 2018 and 2020 respectively. So a lot more volume is coming in this market. Second trend that we've been tracking, average used EV price is now down to what it was in early 2021 at $27,000 average. But the average vehicle being sold today in the used market is much different than it was in 2020. So now we're talking about used Model 3s, used Chevy Bolts. Back in 2021, it was sort of mostly Leafs and e-Golfs and sort of shorter range cars. And then that average price point is also means that a larger and larger portion of the used market qualifies for the $4,000 tax credit that I know that Kath, one of our panelists, is going to get into a little bit later. But at this point, 30% of used EV listings that are out there on the market, and this is plug-in hybrids and battery electric cars, fall under the $25,000 list price, which is a requirement for the new federal incentive. Um, okay, so with that in mind, that tee up, we've got three panelists that I'm excited to introduce. First is going to be J.R. Anderson, who's program manager at Forth. And so he runs the Access to Cars team, focusing on consumer engagements. Hey, JR. Second will be Katherine Garcia, who is the director of the Clean Transportation for All program at the Sierra Club. And her efforts, sort of leading Sierra Club's efforts to accelerate clean transportation policy and investments. And then finally, Shelby Strangfeld, who is a senior sales engineer with Cox Automotive EV Battery Solutions. So he's been doing battery manufacturing since before it was cool, for over 5 years, which is like the majority of the industry's time frame. So one more thing we're going to do is, before we pass it over to JR, is I'd love to just do a little like quick invitation to the attendee chat. If you've spent any time on LinkedIn these days watching discussions about EVs or used EVs in general, you have witnessed the comment sections, which is just this like wild circus of exciting objections and questions and myths. So I would love for folks to put in to the chat, like what are the things that sort of stand out? You know, those myths that are in there, the objections you've seen, the questions you've seen, and just like sort of stream of consciousness, drop them in chat for a minute, and then I think that can help us guide, maybe some of what we're going to cover today. A minute. Thank you, Fourth Webinar, thank you, Simbi, for starting it off. Yeah, road breakage. A lot of, like I hear parking garages collapsing too. Yep. Yeah, this is like the greatest hits of LinkedIn comment sections right here. All right. We're gonna someone, Stuart Simby, is gonna try and sort of like put all of these different myths and objections of questions into a FAQ section here. So okay, let's get over to JR to take it away. So I think let's have all the other panelists turn off our cameras and mute. Okay, JR, it's all yours.
Thank you, Scott. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I hope everyone is doing well. My goal here and at Forth is to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles in America. And today I'll be talking about the used EV market. But as Scott said, the new EV market will eventually become the used EV market. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. State of car fusion. This is the best way I can describe what many consumers may be experiencing today at certain car dealerships. Simply put, better education about the tools needed to accelerate the used EV market can be essential to saving consumers money and allowing people to experience the vehicles firsthand will have an impact. I work with multiple OEM dealerships to utilize the newest electric vehicles available and allow the public to experience them with no sales pressure. I find that this is a very useful technique. A little bit about myself. My name is J.R. Anderson. I'm a program manager of Ford's Access to Electric Cars program, and my focus is consumer engagement, and the outreach work I do is important because it gives consumers a brand agnostic experience with new or used electric vehicles without the pressure of a salesperson. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and I have been residing in Portland since 2019. And as you all are, I've been experiencing all the extreme weather conditions that are being faced globally. In a recent survey conducted by Consumer Reports, it was found that around 70% of Americans expressed some level of interest in buying or leasing an electric only vehicle in the future. Among Americans who expect their next vehicle to be new, 38% of them said that they would at least seriously consider getting an EV today. In 2023, we reached a record number when 8% of all new vehicle sales were battery electric vehicles. This number continues to rise despite media recognizing a lull in the rate of increase. And for some reason, they like to report that a lot. There is still an increase in sales from year to year. It just has gone down slightly. Where a gap does occur is between those who have expressed interest and the number of sales that occur. So today we will discuss some of the reasons why there is a 30% gap. These new EVs will eventually become the used EV market. In America, many people are relying upon dealerships for purchasing, leasing, or selling vehicles. These OEM dealerships sell a mixture of gas and sometimes a lower percentage of electric vehicles. Many of the OEMs have not prioritized EVs yet. Some OEMs are resistant to and only develop compliance cars or none at all. Volvo, who has been vocal about their commitment to going full electric, has hit a new global sales record of EVs in 2023. Tesla's stock recently has been worth more than Ford, GM, Toyota, Volkswagen, and Stellantis combined. This kind of shows what's going on in the market, in the industry, and I think we can see that there is a definite shift coming on. The Consumer Report survey shows the level of consumer experience with electric vehicles is low. Only 5% of the people in the survey have driven an electric vehicle. And dealerships are focusing on what they are more familiar with and the products they can earn more money from, which means there are a lot of ways to improve these numbers. And as exposure occurs, the used EV market also grows. It has been growing since 2012, in fact. The more vehicles that hit the used electric vehicle market and the more information about how inexpensive they are to drive and maintain, it will be clear that this is, at minimum, the best way to get around in your day to day life. Let's talk about numbers now. I'm going to read a quote from Kelly Blue Book. Actually, according to data from Cox Automotive, parent company of Kelly Blue Book, the average price paid for a new EV has fallen significantly. In September 2023, it came down by $14,300 over the prior year. This amounted to a cost of just $2,800 more than the average paid for a new gas-powered vehicle. This was posted in November 17th, 2023. So, and these things don't account for the ease of maintenance and refueling when you do get an EV, how inexpensive and easy it is to maintain these vehicles. Uh, as far as incentives, there are many incentives available, and where you live will determine what you are eligible for. It is important to inform yourselves about the federal, state, city, and utility incentives that are available where you live. These incentives can be checked out on the fourthmobility.org website. The exact URL is shown on the screen currently, and we will post it in the attendee chat as well. How expensive are EVs to own? Just like any vehicle, it depends on the vehicle, but EVs are considerably less expensive to own than gas vehicles, unless you have a giant EV truck, like I guess maybe one of the new Hummer EVs, and you charge strictly with DC fast chargers. And even then, it will still be less expensive to drive, refuel, and maintain than a comparable gas vehicle. EVs are very reliable. I mean, there are situations when in any car manufacturing can go wrong, but the sheer reduction in moving parts and removing millions of internal combustions makes a big difference with reliability and often a huge difference in the cost to refuel and maintain, regardless of the price of vehicle. There are other benefits to driving electric, safety and fatigue. Not many people discuss this, but the regenerative braking systems do more than just add electrons back into your battery packs. They greatly reduce your need to stop short by slamming on the brakes while driving. The other benefit is the lack of vibration from an electric drivetrain, which reduces the fatigue on the driver. So I put on electric vehicle ride and drive events around the Pacific Northwest and have started bringing used EVs to them to educate the public about the vehicles and the incentives that make them less expensive to acquire. One of the common talking points is the IRA clean vehicle credit for new and used vehicles. So with used vehicles, qualified buyers can get up to $4,000 or 30% back from a used vehicle purchase. The vehicle cannot cost more than $25,000 and it must be at least 2 years older than the year of purchase. It also must be purchased from a dealer that has registered for this credit. Here in Portland, there is a dealership called Platt Auto, Platt Auto, that sells all pre-owned electric vehicles. The staff is very knowledgeable and they do not negotiate prices, so it is an easy buying process. I will end with a summary of my experiences after purchasing a few electric vehicles myself. Um, if it isn't already, buying from Tesla should be considered the gold standard for buying an EV or any car, really. After a quick test drive, it took all of 5 minutes to reserve a vehicle and configure the vehicle. This can be done at the dealership or anywhere, really. You get immediate access to the app and get regular updates and can finish the transaction from your smartphone. A few months later, I initiated the purchase of a 2023 Chevy Bolt EV, which for various reasons, when the car was at the dealership, it took 5 hours and about $80 in Uber fees. I don't know about you, but my time is very valuable, and I think this is what we should all strive for, and it will greatly improve your quality of life. Thank you.
All right, thank you, JR. I hope we get your video back for the Q&A section. Something got messed up partway through, but maybe you can work on that.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yep, yeah. All right, Katherine, welcome. I think there's going to be more discussion of the IRA in your section, and then there's a bunch of Q&A that's coming in on that. So we will definitely come back around to that. Okay, take it away.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you everyone who has joined us today. It's so wonderful to see some familiar faces or familiar names, and I'm just really pleased. Thank you to Forth for hosting this really important webinar. Just highlighting one of the points Scott made, supporting the used car market is so important because the majority of drivers do purchase used vehicles over new vehicles. The slides, can somebody bring up my slides? Okay, just to get started, my name is Katherine Garcia. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the director of the Clean Transportation for All campaign, and I am based in Washington, D.C. I've been with the Sierra Club since 2017, and I originally started out of the California chapter, which is based in Sacramento, and working on a lot of legislative priorities and working on policies to advance electric vehicles in the state of California. And then I moved to DC in 2021, and I joined the National Sierra Club campaign. Next slide. Okay. So just to cover, just to provide an overview of my slides here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Sierra Club, the EV benefits, a little bit about federal and state and local incentives, and then switch over to charging. We do hear that charging is one of the main barriers to switching over to electric vehicles, and this is a big part of our advocacy. And so I'll just jump in here. Sierra Club is the oldest grassroots environmental organization in the US. We started in 1892 in California. And since then, it has grown to chapters across the country in every state, along with Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. We began as an outings club and have since, and while that does continue to be a main focus of our organization, over the years, we have expanded to fighting dirty fossil fuel projects, pushing the US to move beyond oil and gas, and helping to advance investments in clean energy and clean transportation. In terms of the campaign that I run, the Clean Transportation for All, our approach is really grounded in the premise that everyone should have access to clean mobility, whether that's transit, biking, walking, or driving a car. And so we approach the work in terms of making sure that we're investing in transit and rail, but for every car that is on the road, making sure it's as easy as possible to shift to electric vehicles. And so we work on investments, policies. We push manufacturers to produce more electric vehicles that are affordable, and really focus on education around electric vehicles and clean transportation broadly. I work with an amazing team of advocates, attorneys, organizers, and analysts and volunteers. Because we are everywhere, it's very likely that you know somebody who works at the Sierra Club or you're a member of the Sierra Club. So thank you to everyone that is on this call and is involved in the Sierra Club in some way. We, a little bit more broadly, we also work to transition to zero emission trucks to reduce freight emissions, and also, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, really work hard to make sure everyone has access to affordable charging, pushing utilities to expand investments in charging, both for light duty and heavy duty. We also really want to make sure that charging is installed in an equitable way, so that it is in workplaces and apartment complexes, so that it's that's a big focus of ours. That utilities are installing charging infrastructure in a way that's complementary to the historic level of funding that we'll be talking about a little bit later as well. So a little bit in terms of our advocacy here, this goes without saying, but transportation is the single largest and fastest growing source of greenhouse gas emissions. And so really, as we tackle the climate crisis, it's super important to make sure that we're investing in clean transportation. And then in terms of vehicles producing health-threatening air pollution, this has a little bit of stats. We rely a lot on the statistics from the American Lung Association to raise awareness about the levels of air pollution in many communities across the country. So here, wanted to provide a little bit of an overview on the benefits of electric vehicles, so protecting public health, tackling the climate crisis, as I said, really curbing greenhouse gas emissions. One thing I wanted to highlight is that transportation costs are the second largest expense for households in the US, and that's just after housing-related expenditures. So we do see that the savings for low-income households are significantly higher than for high net worth individuals. And so from an equity perspective, it's extremely important to be able to be making electric vehicles more affordable, so that we're mitigating the high transportation energy burdens that low-income households face. Okay, so in terms of the federal EV incentives, there is a $4,000 tax credit to buy a used electric vehicle. Of course, as was stated earlier, that has to be under the $25,000 list price. and that it's it's super important because so many more Americans are likely to buy a used vehicle over a new vehicle. And this was when the Inflation Reduction Act was passed. This was the first time that there was a used EV tax credit, and so we are very pleased that that was made to be transferable as well. As of January 2024, many dealers have signed up to register for making that available immediately. And so we're doing some work to make sure that the dealers are promoting that they have registered for the federal tax credit, and making it as easy as possible for everyone to really be able to understand what is in the federal EV tax credit, so that you don't have to be a tax attorney to essentially understand it. We're really focusing on education. I do want to talk a little bit about state EV incentives. Here I have a number of examples. Not every state offers a used EV incentive, so that is one of our policy recommendations, is to offer more so that folks that are interested in purchasing an electric vehicle can stack the state EV incentive on top of the federal EV incentive. And one of my colleagues here will drop in the chat the link to the Achieve policy toolkit. This is a collaboration between Ford, Sierra Club, Plug-in America, and Electrification Coalition. This particular version, the 5th edition, was published in January of 2023, and it has a lot of great policy recommendations and examples. I also wanted to take a second to flag the local EV incentives that are out there. This is specifically an ex-Twitter account from Valley Clean Air Now, which is in San Joaquin Valley, and they do make used EV incentives available when folks trade in their polluting vehicle. And so this is a good example of a local incentive as well. And I will just go through my next couple of slides very quickly because I'm running out of time. But I wanted to highlight, because charging is one of the key barriers to folks adopting new or used EVs. It's extremely important to be aware of the tax credits that are available for low-income and rural communities in terms of stalling residential EV charging, and some utilities offer incentives as well. And then in terms of the federal incentives that are moving forward for charging, this is a great map from the Department of Energy that shows how the charging stations are filling up in between the coasts, and then some highlights here in terms of the large number in Florida and Texas. And then really quickly, this is a chart that focuses on the business as usual case for moving forward with electric vehicles after the IRA. This is modeling from the Energy Innovation Organization. And what we're seeing here is that the IRA does move the needle, but not quite as much as we would get if we have standards. So Sierra Club and many of our colleagues are really pushing EPA and states to adopt stronger standards in order to get more EVs manufactured. And that's a big part of our advocacy. So in order to meet the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, we do really need to move the needle faster. So thank you to everyone for your time, and passing it back to Scott.
Thank you, Katherine. I think there was like a massive discussion going on in the chat about the incentives. So I suspect there's going to be questions for you when we come back. So next up, we kind of did this in chronological order. You know, every EV is new once and then used a couple of times, and then eventually becomes a decommissioned battery. And that's where Shelby is going to jump in here and talk about what that market's looking like. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Yeah, Shelby Strangfeld. I've been with. I started at Spears New Technologies, located in Oklahoma City. Dirk Spears started this company in, I believe, 2014, and he was the very first battery remanufacturer. And so we've been in ever since. And then Cox Automotive acquired Spears New Technologies 3 years ago, I believe now. And so we're really working with them to try to push forward the first life extension and second life uses, as well as recycling. Um, trying to service dealer warranty, OEM warranties, so that we can keep the cars in cars longer, or keep the batteries in the cars longer. Um, as well as find second uses after that battery has been beyond its useful life into a car. And we'll go over maybe ESS systems and then how recycling works. We've had some fantastic changes in the last few years. There's been a few more remanufacturers pop up in the last few years, as well as more companies that are building ESSs out of these car batteries and modules, as well as several different recycling opportunities. So yeah, most EVs are 8 to 10 year, 100,000 mile warranties. Fantastic. That's um, you know uh, I don't know very many people that have owned a vehicle, 8 to 10 years, especially in EV. We haven't even got that far yet, but those are actually under OEM warranties. And so, what a company like Cox Automotive or Spears New Technologies does is, you might have a really simple problem. It usually it's a wiring harness. Maybe part of the computer on board the battery has, a very minor failure, but it does need to be replaced. And a lot of the stuff will actually get captured at the dealership. So a dealer could, turn your battery in your car back to you within a day most of the times whenever you see a battery failure. So it's not always, my battery failed because it caught on fire, right? Typically, it's as simple as, those harnesses coming loose, and so I think they get a really bad rap, in that they don't always fail because this car went up in fire. That's actually a tiny proportion of the actual EVs and the failures you see, with the GM Bolt recall. There was reported, I believe, at the end it was less than 20 actual um, acute failures, right? And so to put that in perspective, there's over 100,000 of those vehicles, right? And so it's some of these vehicles actually have way lower failure modes than ICE vehicles, right? So just be mindful of that. Whenever you see that in the news, some of these failures are just blown way out of proportion. Yes, they have some acute failures. It's the same as ICE though. It's really just painted in a bad light. Um, we have historically been an ICE country. And so some people really like to highlight whenever this new change, this new technology comes about. Um, they're trying to, do their best not to adopt it fully, or they're slow adopters. Yeah, so there's kind of really two ways with REX. What I mean by REX is recycle, remanufacture, or refurbishment. So refurbishment is typically an as good or better model. So if you bring your car into the dealership, they're going to have a company like Cox Automotive that has batteries on hand. And so the as good or better method is referring to the state of health of the battery. So if you bring your car in and the battery is at 95% and that's your state of health, that's your capacity, we are going to fulfill with at least 95% state of health or better so that your car has the same exact range, if not better. So whenever you do bring your car in, you're, and a lot of times actually getting a better battery than we took out. The difference between the refurbishment and the remanufacturing is that typically with remanufacturing, you're actually going to get a 100% state of health battery for your vehicle. So that means if you brought your vehicle in and you're now getting 85% of the capacity that you used to get, you're actually going to be brought back up to 100%. Um, and so if it's under warranty, that's fantastic. You're actually crazy that you get a better product, right? I mean, it's basically a brand new vehicle because all the value is in the battery. Um, and so, typically if you have an ICE vehicle and you bring your engine in, you're not going to get that perfect off the line back into your car. All right. And so now that we were acquired by Cox Automotive, they also own the Mannheim sites. And the early project that we had done with Cox Automotive is that we actually developed a state of health tester, if you will. And so, the Mannheim auction sites have thousands and thousands of EVs and hybrids. And what that tool allows us to do is grade the battery as it's in their lot so that we can give it a score 1 through 5, and so that the customers that go to the dealerships, they can say, hey, this is the capacity of this vehicle. Because I know there's a lot of the secondary market, people get nervous because they say, well, I don't know how good this battery is. So that's one initiative that Spears New Technologies has been taking, is trying to communicate the capacities and the state of health to the end customer, so that they can guarantee the product they're buying is not going to fail in 6 months or a year. So on to the next. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about energy storage systems. So, one reason why most people go EV, right, is so that they can be environmentally friendly. That battery will eventually reach the end of its useful life into a vehicle, and so they don't always go to a scrapyard and sit and pollute. Right, there are many different uses for those, and the most important one, I think, is being converted into an energy storage system. And so what you can do is you can take the cells, the modules, and sometimes even the entire battery um, out of those vehicles, and then you can actually use them as a energy storage system. And so what you can do is provide alternate energy even, and extend that to a second life purpose. A lot of times we'll build these systems, or we have built these systems in the past that 100 kilowatt is pretty common, and you can power a house for multiple days, or if you really conserve your energy, you can even sometimes push that to 15 days, 30 days. And so that's one excellent way to get a more environmentally friendly use out of this vehicle, so that it doesn't die with the vehicle. And the last point here is, we see in Texas a few years ago, they had all these grid uncertainties and whatnot, because they had the huge ice storm and they were not ready for it, as far as their infrastructure goes. And so if we can adopt ESS systems and integrate them into like solar power, whenever we have a grid issue like that, then homes are actually able to run off of this for days, and it won't overwhelm and shut down other important parts of the industries. All right. So the last portion here is recycling. So, not very many people know what happened to the battery. They don't, like I said, they don't go to a scrapyard and sit typically. A lot of the OEMs are really pushing to get that, away from that and go to recycling. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And you can see the picture here. I have, Cox Automotive developed a dry recycling process. And so you can see we'll depower the modules, the cells, make them zero volts, so there's no energy. And then we'll throw them into our shredder, and then the material will get crushed, and they'll get separated into, you'll have your plastics, you'll have your precious metals, so your nickel, aluminum, copper, and then you'll have what's called black mass. And you can see it in the bottom right of this photo here. Really, that's a lithium rich material. And so with all the OEM incentives that the government's been putting out in the United States, they're really pushing to have these three materials, specifically the metals and the black mass. You get tax credit for the OEM if you source in the United States. And so what this allows us to do is have a more circular economy, rather than going overseas and getting our lithium from China or other countries like Africa. We actually can use this black mass, do some further refinement, and then get that back to the manufacturers in the United States, and they're actually able to build new batteries out of that material. Um, yep. So you know, I, people don't understand that these things just don't go sit right. There are plenty of other uses after that. Even if it's not fit for a vehicle, or it's not fit for an ESS, we still have a way to environmentally handle this, and extend the life and actually repurpose it and get it to go back into the circular economy.
Okay, let's get all the presenters back on camera. And so we can sort of start some questions up. I'm actually going to start with JR. Um, oh, whose video is still not working. Oh, bummer. Okay. Anyway, but he's there. So I guess like going back to the dealer side of things, like you've spent some time with Plaid Automotive and other dealers. Like, could you kind of give like a best practice, like what's the secret of the used EV dealership that they're doing really well that 90% of the rest of the market sort of isn't doing yet? Like, who's doing it really well, and just what's like one good tip?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Sorry for the camera issue. I'm not sure what's going on. Um, so I think Plaid, what they do well is it's a very it's kind of similar to some of the work we do. It's very brand agnostic. They get pretty good quality vehicles, like really good quality vehicles, actually. Usually like lease return vehicles, trade-in vehicles, things like that. Very good quality. And then their prices are non-negotiable. They're priced pretty well. I haven't seen anything really questionable on their pricing. And then there's really no negotiation. So it's a pretty simple thing. You ask questions, you drive the car. If you like it, you buy it. And it's pretty simple. I think that's really what they have over some of the other dealerships, where I think the buying process is just it's more simple. It's this you're not always going to, getting that, let me talk to my manager, and you're
Yeah,
sitting there wasting time, kind of, killing 5 hours.
keeping
So
it
I think
simple. Yeah,
that's where they kind of excel. Also,
cool.
just being the fact that they have only EVs or a couple of plug-in hybrids.
Yeah. Catherine, over to you. Now, I don't want this to turn into an information call on the IRA and the used EV incentive, but because there's a lot of questions and that can go that way. How about this? Like, if you could create like the ideal set of used EV incentives, like federal, state, local, what would that look like? I mean, you brought up Connecticut, Illinois, Oregon as doing states that are doing this really well. Like, what if you could wave your magic wand? How would this work?
Thanks. Yeah, I did some thinking on this. And it would be a great to have that magic wand. I think one of the things that I get really frustrated on is when I hear that a state has to pause accepting applications for incentives. Sometimes I recently heard in New Jersey that last year they had to pause and um, you know close that application because they had run out of money. And so I think the first thing I would suggest is um, really funding it at the appropriate level of to really focus on adopting more electric vehicles, really recognizing that this is a priority for the state and for the country, and funding it in a way at the appropriate level to meet that demand. Because the uncertainty of whether the program is still open is detrimental for us moving this market forward. I think one thing we can do is really look at lessons learned from various states. So, evaluating the eligibility of the incentive is really important, taking into account household income and the cost of the vehicle. I think those are appropriate parameters to put on a program, and that helps us stretch the funding further. And then something that California has done, I included some screenshots of the post from Valley Can. Those programs are actually focusing on areas of the state with the highest level of pollution. So then you are narrowing the window down to folks that really face the higher burdens of air pollution. And then also there's an element to that program of actually getting polluting vehicles off the road. So essentially turning in a polluting vehicle and then getting an incentive for a cleaner vehicle, and you get a higher incentive if it's a battery electric vehicle versus a plug-in hybrid. And then one other key issue there is that they do really work with local utilities to make sure that the folks that are purchasing these battery electric or plug-in hybrids do have access to residential charging.
Cool. And what about there are a lot of utility folks on this webinar. Like, what should the role of a utility be in promoting used EVs?
Yeah, well, definitely making sure that there is charging infrastructure in their territory. I think one little example to give National Grid a shout out, and this is also very close to our work as it relates to Sierra Club and Fourth, with the ride and drive events. National Grid has been a partner of National Drive Electric Week for many years and has hosted events in New England and New York. So they will work with folks to bring out electric vehicles, to do a community showcase of electric vehicles. National Grid has invited NGOs to participate and promoted these events. So that's a great example of leadership in this space. So it's not just giving incentives and making sure there's charging infrastructure, but being a part of that education as well. So I've really admired that leadership from National Grid.
Cool. All right, so over to Shelby. This is a curiosity question of mine, actually. So I'm injecting my own question. Like, out of 100 batteries that are decommissioned from EVs, so this is like, battery comes into your workshop, and um, then like out of those 100, like what percentage of them can be refurbished to go back into EV versus can get used for stationary energy storage versus have to go to that recycling bin? Like, just ballpark.
Yeah. I would say it's actually changed a lot in the last 10 years. So I would say around 2010 to 2016, a lot of the OEMs were not really designing for use after this, vehicle, and they're still not, right? But the structure of the battery and the cells they're using are much better now. I would say, we could ballpark it somewhere between 40 and 60% of the batteries we receive, we can get back out into the into another vehicle, and then there, yeah, that leaves probably 20 to 40%, that get moved to either ESS or recycle, and then becomes part of the circular economy that they can then reuse the material out of.
Okay, cool. And then you brought up, it sounded like you were bringing up like energy storage from a decommissioned EV battery that could work at the home level. That's something I hadn't heard of before versus like using that at the substation or grid level. Like, can you talk about what you've seen for that?
Yeah, I've seen it's really a lot of private entities and individuals that are, I'll call them hobbyists. They are finding ways to, these people, maybe you have an RV and you have solar panels on that. They're actually using maybe a smaller than 100 kilowatt hours, but maybe a 50 kilowatt hour ESS system to power the whole campground for 2 days, 3 days from what they're using. And so, uses like that for the private, not only homes, but stuff like that. Same thing in homes, though. The grid goes down, you lose power. There's an ice storm. If you have that rather than a generator, now you're talking a week doesn't even affect you. So
Yeah.
those are a few
Okay.
instances.
Okay. I think I'll tee this up for both JR and Catherine. Like, I guess, have you seen some good examples of program and education efforts that are really increasing accessibility for EVs, whether new or used, that really target multifamily residents, that may or may not be lower income?
Um, Specifically multifamily, I'm not sure, but we've recently done some events. Like last year, we did a couple of events in Washington State through the um, Washington EV Incentive Program, where they wanted to reach out to small CBO, like small businesses and residents in underserved communities, to educate them about EVs and also tell them about basically ask them what kind of incentives they would want. Um, and during those events, the one we did in Seattle was pretty amazing. We did one in Spokane as well, but I you know I think just getting people behind the wheel always changes minds. So that's usually my goal is to just drive the car, see how you like it, and um, the eyes start opening wide and like, oh wow, this is cool. There's no vibration. It's so quiet. So I think those meetings are are great. I think what we've learned at Fourth is that, we need a little bit more time to prepare for those meetings because sometimes we have uh, non-English speakers or not strong English speakers that we have to do um, um, translate some of the incentive documents that we give out so they can understand exactly what we're telling them and utilize the information to the best.
Catherine, you pasted a policy from Delaware on this as an example. Could you give just like the quick high level on that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So in Delaware, they did pass a policy that went into effect last year where multi-unit dwellings can get an incentive for installing level 2 charging. So we're really trying to get the word out about that. I'm sure there's other great examples across the country. And then just to give a shout out to some of the advocates that are working in this space, we've uh, we've talked about the importance of updating building codes so that it's not just about going back and doing the trenching after the fact, because it is always less expensive to have EV ready and EV capable spots ahead of time, ahead of new multi-unit dwellings um, being built. And so just like we are providing more investment in installing charging in multi-unit dwellings, we also want to be proactive as well.
If I can add, that's great, Catherine. If I can add, in Oregon, the Oregon Department of Transportation has a community charging rebate, and I was actually on that team. I did a lot of outreach for them as well, where they were giving up to 75% rebates on publicly accessible level 2 chargers. So we had, it was a very successful program. I forget how many funds they gave out. It was, I think, 1.7 million last year, and then round two is starting in March this year. So if you're in Oregon, there are a lot of incentives that are out there, and these specifically were for publicly accessible chargers and multifamily properties that had 5 or more units. And those didn't have to be publicly accessible, but they had to be accessible for all the residents.
Awesome. Thank you all for sort of like doing this rapid fire Q&A. And I will say we're copying all of the questions out of the chat because there's just been a lot of them. And I think we'll be able to do some email follow-ups to hit those depending on the right person to answer them. So sorry, we like ran out of time. There's lots of good engagement here. Simi, do you want to take it away?
Yes. Thank you so much, Scott, JR, Shelby, and Catherine. I have one question, just for all of the panelists and Scott, you too, you can answer that. Let's look at our crystal ball and and I know we started with what are some myths that you've heard? In maybe a year, 6 months, 5 years, what should we not be discussing when we're talking about used EVs or EVs in general? And I know this is just off the cuff question, so whoever wants to go first, I can have Scott as the moderator. You go first, and we can pass it to JR, Shelby, and Catherine.
Sure. I think a couple of years from now, there's not going to be anybody complaining about where do I charge this thing. I do think charging accessibility for multifamily is a hard problem, and that's probably going to be harder than most others. But I don't think there's going to be I don't want to buy an EV because I can't charge it. I think that's a pretty short term problem.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think after you live with an EV, if you have the availability or the ability to charge at home, whether it's a multifamily house or whatever, it doesn't have to be a very expensive proposition. A level 1 charger can top off your daily range. You only need a level 2 or higher if you just drive more than normal or you have a long trip going. So you can totally just have a regular outlet, a regular plug, and plug in your EV every night, charge it up every night. The battery will be happy, and so yeah, I agree with Scott. Hopefully in a couple years, no one will be worried about this anymore. And my goal is that these charging stations will be placed in places that we need to go. So I have a quote that I used to say last year is basically, with a gas vehicle, you have to go to the gas station to refuel. With an EV, you should be able to just refuel where you go. You should be able to go to the movies, refuel, go to the museum, refuel, go to work, stay at home. So it's a little bit of a change of pattern, but I think we can do it. I think we need to do it.
Thank you. Catherine, Shelby?
Yeah, I think one problem that we're seeing that's actually already been solved, I would say, in the last year is what I covered. Where does a battery end up after it's done? It's not going to landfill. It's not going to, pollute the oceans. We're actually able to reuse it. So that's one thing in the next, I mean, if not already solved by the end of this year, we'll have a clear path forward for every battery.
It's great to follow all of this optimism. I wholeheartedly agree. And the one thing I'll add is just that we'll be seeing more affordable models of electric vehicles. I'm excited about the future.
Thank you all so much for a very informative webinar. And we will be sharing the recording of the webinar as well as the resources and the slideshow with you all after we are done here. We'll just collect some more additional information. We have the contact information for our speakers and panelists here. If you would like to reach out, we will also be including their emails in the follow-up recap. And the webinar season continues, so we hope you can join us in March, March 12th, where we'll be discussing accelerating EV adoption for gig drivers. We had a conversation here about used EVs. It's almost like a theme that we designed. So again, thank you all so much for joining us, and we look forward to chatting with you all offline. And as we set forth, go forth, have a great day, and we will see you all in March. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.